Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. My name is Oluyemi Adeosun. Welcome once again. Today, we'll be looking at the topic, Introduction to Human Resource Management. And I'm happy to welcome for the first time of many, hopefully, our facilitator for tonight, Sarah Essien. Sarah is an HR professional with over 6 years of experience across the consulting, healthcare, tech, finance, and media industry. She has done a lot of things like enabling business and supporting talent acquisition. Sarah is passionate about advancing the recruitment profession in Africa and is currently supporting that space. She holds a bachelor's degree and a master's in industrial relations and personnel management, alongside both local and international HR certifications. Sarah is committed to continuous learning and is always eager to acquire knowledge and apply it to improve organizations and the lives of others. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking to us this evening on the topic Introduction to Human Resource Management, let's welcome Sarah Essien.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Please kindly confirm you can hear me. All right.
We can hear you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir, Dr. Oluyemi Adeosun. Thank you for having me on this webinar series of the HR Mentorship Platform. I'm very, very, very privileged to be here. And I also want to use this opportunity to say a big thank you to you for, giving all HR professionals at different levels, a platform to learn, to upskill, to reskill. This platform has virtually every topic across all HR endeavors. Detailed training that you will spend thousands and thousands of, money to learn. So thank you, sir. Thank you, doctor. And I pray that God will continue to give you more wisdom, more grace and strength, to come up with great and awesome initiatives like this one. Thank you so much, sir. So the topic before me, of course, is Introduction to Human Resource Management. I mean, every profession has a background, right? No profession fell from the sky. Every profession has a background in different other professions. In other professions, every profession has a background. So also the HR profession as well has a background across, different disciplines, different experiences, and different endeavors. So we'll be looking at the Introduction to Human Resource Management, and doing that today, we'll be looking at these different top contents, right? Definition, of course, no introduction without a definition. The different models, or 5 key models in HR. I'll be looking at a brief history of the profession, and how we have moved, our movement, the objectives, key features, and the nature of human resource. So we'll just dive in. All right. So looking at human resource, I mean, there have been different definitions, different perspectives, right, to human resources. And I mean, why won't there be? Human resources is the most valuable and unique asset, of any organization. I mean, the successful management of any organization hinges on the study or on the engagement of studying of the human resource field. So if an organization, wants to grow sustainably, wants to scale, wants to be competitive enough, the human resource aspect of that business must be much more strengthened, because there is actually no business. There is actually no business without the people. The human resource, of course, is one of the resources needed for the business, but it is the most important resources. because if you have all the available resource and you don't have the human to manage the capital, to manage the other equipment and everything you have to do your business, the business is actually not complete and cannot run effectively. So human resource is the most valuable and unique asset of any organization, and the successful management of these resources is actually an exciting, dynamic and challenging task, especially at a time like this, that the world has become a global village, and economies are changing every day. Economies are in a state where nothing is constant. The expectations of the human of the employees are changing, expectations of employer are changing day by day, and even the world at large is also changing. So at a time like this, the knowledge of human resources is very important, both for the human resource professional himself and for the line managers, because we are in a time where the line managers are even more of a frontliner, to engaging in the responsibilities, of. Can you still see my screen? Is it changing? Okay, seeing it from me.
Yes, we can. Please proceed, continue.
Okay, sir. All right. So human resources can be viewed from, three angles. Can be viewed as a field of study, as a business venture. It can also be viewed as a practical, as a practice from a practical point of view, which I believe most of us on this call are part of. Now, of course, as a field of study, we go to school to study it as, excuse me, as a field of study, we go to study different courses in human resources. You have a bachelor's degree in human resources, we have different degrees, PhDs and all of that in human resources, where we come out with different models, we come out with different models, different theories and frameworks, that help both the business and the practice of the profession, very viable. All right, so we said as a field of study, it is viewed as an academic pursuit through research in universities and professional institutions. I mean, we see the development, like I said, of models, framework, and theories, and we are going to be looking at some of these models as we proceed. And of course, as a business venture, the human resource management is viewed as a commercial service, where we have organizations or individuals in entrepreneurs, build businesses and provide HRO solutions for other organizations who are not HRO inclined, and majorly for profit making. And then we have it as a professional practice, where we actually carry out the day-to-day activity. We actually carry out the day-to-day application of the models, the principles, the frameworks, where we carry out the day-to-day activities of those frameworks in the actual practice of the profession. So it refers to the day-to-day application of HR principles within any organization. And this is where HR professionals like managers, HR business partners, and recruiters, and the different specialties you can find in the profession, you can find them operating as a practice. Now, to the definition of HR, it's no news that, HR is where we manage, it's the process of managing people, managing the human resources within the organization. There's been various definitions of human resources as a strategic function, as an activity, as a process, as a science, as an act, different perspectives, different definition, but all those definitions all align and sync to the fact that human resource management is designed, or is designing of a management system to ensure that the human talent is used effectively and efficiently to do what? To accomplish organizational goals. So we said here that it is the study It is the study, practice, or business of managing the employees of an organization to achieve the goals and objective of the company. We also said it involves rather how these employees are attracted, how they are selected, trained, and compensated for their contribution. We also said it is the act of procuring, right? Talent acquisition is actually procurement. But what are we procuring? We are procuring talent, we are procuring humans, we are procuring skills and developing them, maintaining them, ensuring that they are competent workforce within an organization to achieve the goals of the organization in an effective and efficient manner. So we'll be looking at various model. We have the Michigan model, we have the Harvard model, we have the guest model, we have about 5 key models. I'll be looking at them. One of the importance of looking at models in HR is just to build theoretical foundation. Anyone without theoretical foundation in any field, may struggle a little bit when it comes to practice. But with the right theoretical foundation through models and different frameworks in that profession, you tend to build a solid foundation. And that's why we are doing models in HR. And I want to reiterate once again that learning or list or relearning, let's say relearning, or be more emphatic about introduction to any course actually gives you a great foothold to that profession, such that you have a very solid foundation. Because like they say, relearning and emphasis on learning, relearning, learning is actually building foundation for any field. So the Michigan model, emphasizing on the alignment of HR system with organizational strategy. It's not today that we started talking about organizational strategy, and we are still talking about it today. The implementation is currently aggressive across different organizations. And this is what Michigan model is saying, that HR are not just systems, the systems are to be aligned with organizational strategy. And the HR practice must also match, with organizational strategic goals. So that's why the Michigan model is usually called the matching model, and it's also called the hard model because its approach is somewhat uses human resource, or uses the human in the organization as more like a cost center, more like factors of production, just like we have it back in those days. But we have other models as well, who have come to soften the model and also give us a better perspective. So for the Michigan model operates across 5 or 4 different elements, which is the reward, excuse me, which is the reward. It starts from selection. From selection, it goes to appraisal, then reward, and then development. So yeah, and this model rather, or this element, actually called the HRO cycle, where it is argued that organization must manage employee through these 4 processes to ensure connection with the organizational strategy. One of the major strengths of the Michigan model is that it emphasizes alignment of the HR business, or of the HR with the business goals. Alignment such that HR is not just on its own doing different things, doing its own activities, initiative, and all of that, while the organizational goals are just over there. This framework, or this model, is will I say, agitating for the strategic alignment of HR initiatives or HR goals with the people goals. And that is exactly what currently we are all implementing rather across all our HR, all our organizations. Okay, so we said why the Michigan model is more important. It's more important because the model introduced several important ideas, like the strategic alignment idea that we talked about, such that HR policies, initiatives, activities must also align with business strategy. And it also views HR as a system whereby all HR activities are interconnected. I mean, if you look at the different HR functions, like we'll see later, they are all interwoven. None of it is in isolation of the other. You cannot you cannot say, oh, my own is recruitment. Fine, there are specialists in the different fields, but even those specialists in those different fields have to be dependent on other specialists within the organization, to have an effective department and an efficient unit. And the model is also performance oriented, such that it ensures that performance of the of the employees within the organization and the organizational outcomes are actually in sync. And of course, they will usually be in sync because the organizational outcomes are usually as a result of the performance of the individuals in the organization. Okay, so let's go to the next one. The next one is the Warwick model. And the Warwick model was developed by researchers at the University of Warwick in the early 90s, and where the model emphasizes that HR strategies are also shaped by external and internal conditions. External conditions would talk about the things that we actually don't have control. Our control over those things are very, very limited. While the internal conditions are what we can actually control. But looking at the external conditions or environmental forces, Warwick has about 4 or 5 elements, that makes the model effective, or that it talks about in its model. One of it is the outer context, which is the environmental, which is actually an external context, and there are microeconomic micro environmental forces, right? They can also be microeconomical forces, right? Microeconomical forces are external forces as well. I mean, most of the time you don't have control over the economic situations in any of the countries, or any of the country you're working in, or you don't have control over the economic atmosphere in a particular country. You either tweak your own policies, your own activities to suit what is going on in that environment. So we have environmental forces. Okay. Sorry, I'm being distracted by that sound. All right, so we have outer context, like I said, which are actually external forces to the internal forces within the organization. And then we have the internal forces as well. The outer context will be political, can be economical, can even be the perspective of other prospective candidates, right, within an organization. We have the business strategy context, and we have the HRM context in 2 ways. So the internal context talks about the structure, the culture, like I said, the leadership, authority, and tax or technology that the business operates within. And that inner context can also be the business strategy of that organization. Talking about the goals, it's possible that the goals of the organization are not so smart, It's possible that, you know, the goals of the organization were just copied from another organization, which may not really have the same activities with that organization. And you may find out that and that could lead to a lot of struggles, you know, trying to align different activities which does not really match with the company. So we have the Warwick model that says that, I mean, both the external context, the inner context, the business strategy, the HRM context. The HRM context talks about how the human resource department, you know, position, or human resource personnel, you know, individually position themselves within the organization, how they position themselves, what is their level of influence, their level of authority within that organization, you know, how much influence they have, how much how much influence they have to how much influence they have, you know, within the organization to carry out their different strategies. All right, so the Harvard, we have Harvard model, which is a direct contrast to the very first model. That's the Michigan model. The Harvard model speaks to, you know, speaks to more like integrating different stakeholders, ensuring that there is stakeholder participation, you know, is more softer to the human resources. The employee is a more softer approach to managing the employee other than the Michigan model. And in the Harvard model, the HR decision, you know, consider employees' management, society, and shareholders. Like I said, it considers the different stakeholders, and it has so much emphasis on this stakeholders' participation within the business. And it identifies four key policy areas, or four key elements, right, which are situational factors, shareholder interest, HR policy choices, HR outcome, and long-term consequences. And we said that the situational factors are also external factors, just like we have the Warwick model, which also deals with external forces, you know, outer force, because it's outer forces, which is the same thing as, you know, situational factors outside your control that are external to the business and external to the business environment. Those situational factors are, you know, we have different models of, you know, measuring external factors, more like the staple, the NESU. NESU, the PESU. PESU is talking about political, economical, legal, sociological, you know, even environmental factors and economic factors as well. So we have those different factors, and the Harvard model is saying that these factors are all, you know, all influences HR decisions in one way or the other. And then we have the policy choices, and the Harvard model highlights, you know, four core policy choices, or four core policy choices that HR, you know, should have, right? Key policy areas. It emphasizes on employee influence, talking about the participation and involvement in decision. How participatory are your employees, or are the employees within the organization to the decision making? What kind of decision making model runs in that organization? But Harvard is saying it should be employee intensive, such that the employee are part of those decision making process. And then we have another key policy practice that the Harvard model also preaches, talking about the human resource flow. This is majorly just the different activities within the human resource, function, talking about recruitment, development, training, promotion, performance management, and all the various activities that the human resource department engages in. And then reward system, talking about the compensation, the actual exchange, for the work that the employee, for actual exchange of the employee's skills and competencies to the organization. All right. So apart from, the fourth outcome, or the fourth framework or element that the Harvard model talked about, is the HR outcome. And it says that, the effective HR policies must also lead to desirable outcome. And those outcomes, Harvard model also highlights 4 major outcomes that HR policies should seek to to get, or to ensure that their HR policy results in the commitment, competence, congruence, and cost effectiveness, such that employees are loyal and engaged, employees possess every necessary skills, all necessary in terms of competence. We are responsible for ensuring that employees are competent enough to achieve the goals of the organization. And there must also be an alignment, between the employees' expectation or stakeholders' expectation and the organizational expectation. And that is one of the major defects or criticisms of this model, because you will agree with me that we are all human beings. You can't really align all our expectations, the expectations of different stakeholders who are from different backgrounds with different perspectives, different goals in their heads and all of that. So the one of the major setbacks of this model is that you cannot really align the different expectations of, or the different stakeholders, or different expectations of different stakeholders within the organization. All right. So, and the other last element of Harvard model is the long-term consequences, such that HR decisions, influences the long-term decisions of business, or long-term outcome of any business, such as the individual well-being, the effectiveness of the organization, and the societal welfare. For HRO to be effective, it means that HRO must also be part of a sustainable outcome. We ensure that the organization has a sustainable outcome, of ensuring the individual well-being, organizational effectiveness, and societal welfare. And when we talk about societal welfare, we are talking about what the different activities of the organization that affect the community. Either now we don't just have physical community, we also have online community. And sometimes, in fact, these days, online community is way larger, and bigger than even the physical community. So HRO has a direct role to play in ensuring that the organization builds, a strong and healthy societal welfare as they carry out their business. Okay, I think, so we've covered the Welwick model. So there's also the Ulrich model, developed by David Ulrich. Okay, before I take David Ulrich, I'd like us to take the guest model. I'd like us to take the guest model. The guest model majorly looks at HRO, drives HRO, what's it called, behavior, is more performance oriented, such that it drives the behavior of employees within and organizational performance, pardon me. It's more focused on driving employee performance to achieve organizational performance. And it does that through HR strategy, through different HR practices that we have, different HR outcomes. And then it also has, it looks forward to behavioral outcome, ensuring that the practices, the strategy, the outcome of HR is leading to strong behavioral outcome, is leading to strong behavioral outcomes, and business and other growth outcomes as well. Okay, are we still together?
Yes, we are.
We're with you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so looking at the Ulrich model, the Ulrich model is a more modern model, right, to the human resource profession, where it talks about it categorizes the HR profession into 4 strategic roles, talking about the change management, looking at HR as the change agent, looking at HR as a strategic partner, looking at HR as an administrative expert, and as employee champions. Because, and this model is also most practicable in different organizations, other than the other models that we've looked at. The other models we've looked at most times are mostly more theoretical than practicable, because they are either to the extreme or they are either too ideal, right, for practice. But we look at the Ulrich model, which of course and has been widely used by different organizations. And if we even look at it now, we have, across the different jobs that we see on HR, we have that same model implemented. As an administrative expert or as a strategic partner, the model looks at, moving HR from just an administrative role to being part of the strategic business of the organization, aligning to the strategic goals and goals and objectives of that organization. And like I said, is often adopted by different organizations with diverse HR team. And currently that model has been also integrated into what we call the HR business partner model, the center of excellence, and the shared service. The Ulrich model is performs multiple strategic and operational roles to deliver value to the organization. So as a change agent, the model is more of looking at carrying out transformative responsibilities or transformative activities for the organization, talking about restructuring, change management, and building different structures that would help the organization thrive. And then so one major aspect about this model is that when you go to an organization, or let's say a big organization, they divide their different they divide the HR unit into 3 different units within that same HR unit, where you have the HR BPs or the HR business partners, and then you have the COEs, that's the center of excellence, and then you have the shared services. The HR business partners are more like a strategic focus. They have a strategic focus to the business, whereby they are more in tune with the different business unit leads or the different business leads within the organization. They most times have nothing to do with the administrative part of that of the particular unit that they face. While the shared services has more role to play in terms of administrative. They are more of the administrative experts, They are more, they are more into carrying out the different documentation policies, and talking about payroll and all the activities, all the different HR, operational activities that come with the unit or with managing the people. And then we have employees as employee champion as well, who will find more with those interfacing with the unions, those interfacing with, in an organization where there is where there is an active union, will have the different HR, we'll have a dedicated HR personnel or manager, executive, interfacing with the union, and also feeding back the HRBPs, to ensure that there's a smooth run of activities within the organization. Okay, so this is just a summary of the key 5 models: the Michigan model, the Harvard model, the Guest model, the Warwick model, and the Ulrich model. And we said that the Michigan model, the core feature of the Michigan model is their strategic alignment. The fact that they emphasize on the fact that the organization or the HR unit must ensure it is aligning with the goals of the organization. The HR unit is not operating in isolation of the goals and objectives of the organization. And we said the key idea is that, it must match with the business strategy. And the orientation there is that it is actually a hard way of managing people. It has viewed HR as, a hard, the orientation from that is that it is a hard way of managing the people, because most of the time, when you're using this model, you're looking away from the welfare, you're looking away from motivation, you're just more focused on the business, only the business, and you're not looking at how the business is actually achieving the goals through the people. You're not looking at the soft, people side to ensure that the goals are actually being achieved. And then we said the elements are selection, appraisal, rewards, and deployment. And then we looked at also the Harvard model, we looked at the Guest model and the Warwick model. All right, so a brief history of HR is that HR started from the informal, okay, let me not say brief history of HR, but from the informal era, from the, let's say, before the 20th century, we had HRO existing as there was non-existence of formal HR. Let me put it like that. Employees were practically called labor. It was, and the management of employees there then was informal, where employers then do a face-to-face bargaining with the employees. And that's also because the kind of activities they run in those days were majorly agrarian activities, more activities where there was no industrialization, and labor themselves were not so enlightened to ask for better terms of engagement, better condition, better working environment, and all of that. So that informal era is actually characterized by an informal form of managing employees. It's the focus majorly was on wages and maybe basic condition of work. And then we had the Industrial Revolution era came into being between the 18th and the 19th century, right? Where we started seeing the creation of large factories, the acquiring of large factories, that now required systematic management of the larger workforce that were coming into the organization. We saw the production or manufacturing of machineries, equipment, and different processes as well that were brought in to the advancement of technology. let's say advancement or start of technology, right? So the need of, technical specialization at that time increased, and, however, work somehow became monotonous as jobs, are operated via machines. And so workers at that time became mere operators. They became, even though it was an industrial era, there was also very little plight from the government at that time, or very little intervention from the government to defend the plight of concerned workers. But then there were so many agitation rising, and that was where we had the scientific management of the scientific management era, right, coming into being. And this was largely propagated by Frederick, W. Taylor, where he advocated for scientific management to scientific management generally, which was then tailored to the managing of human resources. And during this era as well, we had the introduction of trade unions, also called labor unions, and then we had different endeavors, right, to improve the work conditions, pay and benefits of the organizations. And then we had, because of the different agitations, we now had companies who now started looking at hiring personnel management to handle administrative tasks, to handle basic things, concerning the personnel within the organization. So moving on from that, we now had different HRO emergence, right? We had different movements of the HRO field, and one of it was the human relations movement. We had the human relations movement. We had the human relations movement. We had different studies, like the Houghton study that highlighted the importance of workers in the workplace, and organizations or employers started to take a better look at these agitations, and then they also embraced some of these agitations that led to what we have as modern HR in the 21st century. All right, so what we have as modern HR in the 21st century actually also evolved from the strategic HRO emergence, where we evolved from administrative to being a strategic partner. Our functions expanded, to include even training and development, from just handling payroll, employee records, and what have you. We now moved to performance management, tailoring different performance systems, ensuring that their recruitment strategies, there is a talent management process that tailors or that ties to the objectives of an organization. So the modern HR in the 21st century speaks to technology, globalization, the now of HR, systems, the human resource policies, the different changes that are cropping up, within the space of the workforce, both local and global. These changes are not limited to only a particular location. They are changes that we are experiencing all over the world. HR now also focuses on employee experience, and it means the HRO is not just just relegated to the background or just relegated to administrative tasks. We have moved from an administrative era to operational era. We have moved to the strategic era, and currently we are in the stakeholder era, right? Where business leaders are no longer just asking HR to align, they are asking HR to solve different problems within the business. They're asking HR to, directly assess, analyze, different human or employee problems that could lead to business problems, within the organization. So we have moved from administrative to strategic partner. We have moved from static roles to dynamic career paths. We are no longer called HR personnel. In those days, you see HR personnel, you see is it even HR personnel or personnel management? Yes, personnel manager. And we have moved, we have seen different perspective of those names. We've seen human capital manager, we've seen now we are seeing talent development manager, we are seeing talent managers, we are seeing dynamic career paths. We are no longer stuck in one particular role of handling administrative tasks, or where some people will say, shebi HR is just all about hiring and firing. No, HR is actually beyond that. And HR is actually beyond that. And we have moved, from those static roles to different dynamic career paths, talking about specialty specialists in all the different aspects of the HR function. All right, so we have different we have features, right? Every profession or every profession or industry have their different characteristics, have their different nature. And the nature of HRM is such that HRM is action oriented. The HR practice either as a field of study or even as a business endeavor, is action oriented, is individual oriented. And what do we mean by action oriented? It means that it's not just record keeping or writing of procedures or rules. It means HR takes the active space or active role, in solving problems of either the employees or even the problems of the business itself. You see HR, aligning different employees' metrics or characteristics to either solve business problem or to either identify a business problem that needs to be solved. And this also helps, the organization to be proactive. So this is just saying that HR is no longer taking the backstage, of just being relegated to the background. HRO, it now has, seats, as we usually say, at the table. And as somebody will say, if you don't have seats at the table, you do what? You create one. And HRO has, all those capacity to do that. And, the course of HR characteristics is also individual oriented, whereby it seeks to get the best out of every employee, out of every staff, where each staff or each employee is treated with utmost respect and dignity. And no role of an employee is relegated to the background, or no employee is treated as though he or she was not skillful or is not skillful. Besides, if that employee is not skillful, I'm not sure the organization would have gone ahead to bring that person into the business. For every organization, for every individual in a business, it means there is a role, no matter how little, that person does within the organization. It is the responsibility of the HR, right, or the HR department, the HRM, to identify the strengths of that particular employee and put them in the right place. By being individual oriented, we also provide career opportunities, so that employees do not leave the company. It's possible that somebody is already getting tired of a particular, getting bored, yes, of a particular a particular role within the organization. And that's why we have rotations. That's why we have job rotations. That's why we have different units that employee can actually go through the different units or departments to find a more suitable, career landing. All right. We also said HRO is people oriented. It's all about people at work. It's both individuals and group. HRO does not just look out for one set of persons within the organization, a set of persons. Remember the stakeholder elements we talked about on the Harvard model or the Harvard framework. HRO looks into the different stakeholders within the organization, different stakeholders, different groups. Look at the skilled. You're ensuring that whatever policy that is being cascaded is not just high level, is brought down to the skilled, is brought to the level of from the level of the skilled, brought to the level of the unskilled, and even the semi-skilled. So we are not just dishing out policy and you're just keeping, the policy at the skilled level. HRM, brings people together, is people oriented by communicating, a particular policy or a decision, from the top management to the understanding of everybody. Because guess what? If a policy has been, given, or a decision has been taken by top management or the skilled level, and it just remains at the skilled level, the communication is not well dissipated, the communication is not well thorough, such that the unskilled men or unskilled workers within the organization can, understand what the decision is all about, and is also able to implement. So being people oriented helps with, effective implementation of policies, effective implementation of, different decisions, and, different changes that may want to occur within the organization. The HR, one of the features of HR is also that HR is future oriented. We are not just preparing people for current roles. We are also preparing people for, the future challenges or the future goals of that organization. The future goals of that organization. And employees are HR develop different assignments. Let's say develop, or through the line managers, right? Bring up different assignments that will help employees take up, or that will help employees develop skills, that will match the goals of the organization, future goals of organizations. HR is also development oriented, such that it's, not just develops full potential of the organization, but there is this ongoing, let's say ongoing training, that HR gives, or let's say HR gives, that HR coordinates. Yes, HR ensures goes on within an organization, either through tasks, like we said, through indoor training, outdoor training, external or internal trainings, right? Just to ensure that the potentials of each of the staff is being sharpened and, shaped and improved upon to meet the different challenges of that organization. It also ensures that, the organizations, the employees are exposed, right, to even different tasks beyond the tasks that they currently carry out within the organization. And we also saw that, the nature of HR is also such that it is an integrating mechanism. It strikes a balance. We saw where it was people oriented, while it is, interfacing with people, different people across different levels. It is also striking a balance, across the different groups of people, like we said, the skilled, the unskilled, and the semi-skilled within the organization, such that there is no attempt to create any form of tension. There is no tension, or whatever tension that the different stratas within the organization can create. HRO helps to douse that tension by ensuring that there's a free, work environment, for people to freely air their views, for people to freely give opinions, as they carry out their different activities. Looking at different things or different emotions can flare up within an organization. It is the responsibility of the HR to ensure that those tensions and emotions running through the different people we have in the organization are well doused, or they are also used for the growth of the organization. All right. So as a practice as well, HRM as a practice also carry out a comprehensive function, which is concerned with managing people, same thing as managing people at work, and the different strata of workers, supervisors, top managers, and handling all issues relating to the different sphere of HR. So we see auxiliary service where HRO assists the different, there was something one of the HR leaders put up some time ago, that HRO has gone beyond, the HRO is now more of an advisory role, right, to line manager, top management, and it's not HRO is not the one actually firing or directly hiring. The hiring managers are actually the line managers. And so HRO stands in that position of, providing more of advisory services, to acting like more a consultant, right, to the different line managers or business leaders within the organization, for them to effectively work with their different team members to achieve their work more effectively. So as an interdisciplinary function, we see HRO acting in different disciplines. HRO is the counselor. HRO acts across different disciplines, because we are dealing with humans, and so you must at least have a 5 or 10% knowledge, of every discipline, to be well wholesome or well equipped to manage the different strata or different people that you have within the organization. And as we have seen, HR is also a continuous function. You want to build a scalable an organization that is scalable, that is sustainable. The continuous function of HR, must remain, or must continue to be effective. All right, so we have the importance of HR, of human resource management, and one of the importance of, one of the reasons why most people ask, why do we even need human resource management? What's the essence of human resource management in today's world and competitive environment? Organizations must deal with, there are so many diverse changes. We have the VUCA. We are in a VUCA environment, as we usually say it, where things are always changing, where expectations are changing, expectations of employers, of the employees, and with the changing environment or changing expectations of things, the traditional concept of value, or traditional concept of what we know as the function of HR, or function of finance or accounting, or function of any industry, right, no longer holds. There are modernizations, as we have seen that even HR is moving, or has moved, and it will continue to move. You know, even though some of our organizations are still stuck, you know, in the traditional way. And we've also have perspective that has, you know, said we must also combine both the traditional and modern, modern factors to ensure we have an effective management of the unit. But what are the importance of HR, human resource management? You know, for human resource for the organizations to be sustainable, to build sustainable business growth, we have research from Deloitte, or research, not just Deloitte, we also have research from Gallup, right, that have come to indicate that organizations with strong talent management and practices are more likely to achieve above average financial performance, such that the function of HRM, or the importance of HRM, directly impacts on the financial performance of any organization. Because like we said earlier, if the people are not well managed, are not well motivated, or are not well engaged, right, there is every tendency that the organizational goals will not be achieved, both financial and non-financial goals. So it is important, HRE is important to every organization, not just to build growth, or not just to grow, but to also build a sustained growth, a growth that can scale. You know, as the organization is growing in finance or accounts or whatever, the human resource must ensure that the people are also growing, such so that the business growth can be sustainable and, as we said, scalable. It is also important to build a strong culture. So as an organization is growing, its culture must also be strong. And we have seen the research from a research from Harvard Review also highlights that companies with strong culture, or company with strong culture and experience, or employee experience, have higher employee commitments and stronger collaboration, you know, improved innovation. That's companies with strong culture, experience, high employee commitment, and stronger collaboration, improve innovation, actually thrive and grow. If a company is not strong on culture, is not strong on building a culture that encourages employee commitment, that encourages loyalty, that encourages, you know, strong collaboration, that encourages innovation, or, you know, improvement across board. You know, the country may be the organization, I'm not even sure it can even grow financially, because these are key factors that are needed for the organization to grow, and they directly impact on the different employees. And that's why the human resource management is important. And another importance of human resource management is to, you know, enhance productivity for performance, productivity, business productivity, you know, and individual productivity. If you know, through recruitment, or through effective recruitment, training, performance management, and, you know, different motivation systems, the function of HRO helps the employees, you know, to perform at their best. If employees are not performing at their best, there is no how the organization will be productive. So productivity of an organization is directly linked to the productivity of every employee. And according to the research from Gallup also, it says highly engaged employees perform, you know, 18 to 23% better than non-engaged employees. They are much more productive. Of course, somebody doing their normal activity, doing their normal work, can be termed as productive. But when somebody is going all and above, you know, carrying out the ABC, going all above and beyond the call of duty, you know, to do what needs to be done. He's not just doing what needs to be done, he's doing it and he's going the extra mile to ensure excellence, to ensure effectiveness, to ensure cost effective. You're not giving, let's say you're not giving a sales manager a particular responsibility and it just uses, goes above your budget, goes above the intended budget to do whatever needs to be done. But you have somebody who has, who is intentionally going above and beyond the call of duty because he or she has, has has been equipped, let's say equipped best, and so he or she will go beyond their expectations or beyond expectations to ensure that a particular goal is met. So I'll just run through. It's like our time is getting fast spent. Okay, so we also have overall organizational effectiveness, as a major importance of the HR. The department of the human resource management, is important for harmonizing expectations between the employees and the employer. Yes, like we've said repeatedly, that there are different expectations, and those expectations are changing every day, day by day, every minute, because of different generations as well. The expectations of the baby boomers is different from the expectations of the millennials. It's definitely different from the expectations of Gen Zs, and it's definitely now different from the expectations of the Gen Alphas that is also coming behind them. So we have changing expectations. We have even the employers' expectations are also changing. It's no longer financial. We also want to ensure internal processes are in place, looking at the 4 cardinal points of balanced scorecard. So expectations are changing day by day. And so HRO is definitely important, or it is the organization, every organization needs, effective HRs to do what? To ensure the harmonization or alignment of these different expectations so that the organizations can achieve their goal, both short term and even on the long run. And of course, HRM is needed for organizational effectiveness. We've had different studies, not just CIPD rather, come to demonstrate that effective HR system lead to improve organizational performance and also reduce workplace conflict. When HR management, or when the human resource management aligns people, process, and strategy to ensure that the organization operates effectively, then we can have a viable organization. All right, so in summary of that, I wrote here that organizations achieve sustainable success not only through strategy or technology. My laptop just went off. Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm so
Yes, we can.
sorry. My laptop just went up because I wasn't seeing my screen directly. Please just give me a few minutes. I'll come up now.